Hey guys, as always, thank you for tuning in. Jay Helmsing here. Today we're going to be talking about the Arex REX Delta striker-fired pistol. I did an extended test of this gun, so I've got a lot of stuff to get into. Before we get started, I will kind of apologize. The garage is a cluttered mess. This is not a recording studio. I'm still shooting these out of my garage. This is not something that I do full-time by any means. So I've got about 6 projects going on. You're going to see things scattered everywhere. Keen-eyed observers are going to notice I replaced my American thin blue line flag with just a thin blue line flag behind me, so that's kind of a standalone now. Believe it or not, most of my comments come from my ambiance. You know, people asking about my refrigerator behind me and things like that. So either I'm really boring or you guys really just don't like looking at my ugly mug, which I really can't complain too much about that. I don't blame you there. But that has been replaced. I kind of got into that in my Instagram, you know, why I had that American thin blue line flag there. It was a gift. And it is in my garage. This is, like I say, it's not a studio, it's my garage, so this is just how things are. It's not set up to record videos. I just kind of plop down a camera and go at it. The American flag is outside, the actual American flag, but that apparently offended quite a few people. I got a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but I got quite a few pretty heated comments about that flag. So I took it down, I replaced it with a thin blue line flag. If your problem is you just don't like cops, there's not much I can do for you there. I'm a police officer, it's what I do, and nothing's really gonna change that. So if you don't like cops, if you just think I'm a lousy pig or whatever it is because I'm a police officer, you can probably just go ahead and tune into a different video at this point, because that stuff's not going to change. Okay. Now that all that is out in the open and that is done and over with, let's go ahead and dig right into this gun. Really interesting findings with this gun, and I think there's not a whole lot out there. Now, I got this gun right when it came out, so I went to the NRA annual meeting and I was able to put my hands on this gun, and when I did, I thought, wow, that feels really neat. I really like that gun, so I immediately went back and I ordered one. And I got it about 3 days later, so I've had it for a while now and done, like I said, some extensive testing of this gun. Alright, so as I said before, we're going to kind of start out these videos now with a pro and con list. I know some of you just don't like my pedantic blathering and things like that, and I respect that. So let's go ahead and kind of go through this list really quickly, just a real quick cliff notes on what I found good, what I found not so good with this gun. So let's start out with the pros first. The pros, this is a feature-packed gun. It has all kinds of features that you're going to see on different platforms, but really not together in the same platform like you have here, and we'll kind of get into the weeds of that here in just a few moments. Ergonomics are going to be kind of hit or miss. I really dig them. Most people that have handled this gun really dig it, but there are some kind of nuances I'm going to maybe kind of bang on here just a little bit. But overall, the ergonomics are really nice. It conceals very well. It's very well thought out as far as concealment and things like that, and how somebody in contemporary times would use a gun. So it's very, you know, it's grippy enough, but it's not abrasive if you carry it against your skin and things like that. Just a lot of real attention to detail went into this gun. It is very robust. In my testing, and I did some extensive testing with this gun, I wouldn't really say torture testing, but I did really kind of beat it like a rented mule. I was not able to get this gun to malfunction at all. It was very reliable. It went through water testing like it was just built to handle it. And I really think kind of a trademark of Arex is they really do some really good torture testing of their guns. If you look into that kind of stuff, there's really not too much out there environmentally or whatever that's going to hang these guns up. So very neat to see there. It is a very accurate gun. If you guys check out my Instagram, I do have a posting on there about me taking this through my police qualification. I got 100 out of 100 there. So this is, I am authorized to carry this gun. But the grouping was really nice. You can shoot this really well. You can get very tight groups once you kind of learn that trigger. And again, we'll kind of get into the weeds of that as this kind of progresses here. Overall, just a really nice gun. And I'm going to kind of cap off these pros here with the introductory price. So I bought this right after the NRA convention. I put my hands on it at the NRA convention. I thought, man, I really need to get one of those. I went and ordered it, and I had it 3 days later, and I paid $425 basically right out of the box as soon as they hit the shore here. So the introductory price is really cheap, and it's right along the lines of like the P10 from CZ, those Canet guns, things like that. They're quality firearms that are really hitting in that low end range of cost, and it's really hard for me now to see why anybody would justify like a high point or some of those guns, when for maybe like $100 more in most cases you could have a quality firearm like this and a few other selections out there. So it is very, very competitively priced, and for the money you're getting a heck of a gun in this package here. Now let's go on to the cons of this gun. First con I'm going to go ahead and point out is that it's snappy. It is not a incredibly snappy gun. Of course, it's 9mm, but for its size, it does snap a little bit more than like a Glock, a SIG, some of those other guns you might be used to. It's along the lines of maybe like a Walther PPQ or something like that. Again, not unmanageable, but it does have a little bit more noticeable snap than some other guns out there. Part of that is probably due to the weight. It is a very light gun. It's lighter than a Glock 19, but it also has some things internally that we'll talk about too that might be contributing to that snap that you kind of get with this gun. So it is a little bit snappy. The other thing that I will comment on, and I said it was a pro before, the ergonomics are probably not for everyone. Now everything is really well thought out, and everybody that I've had put their hands on this gun has really been able to you know, say, wow, that's comfortable in my hand. But there are some things that we'll get into here that I didn't really care for that could probably be improved a little bit. As a matter of fact, there is one thing on here that I improved myself because it was so annoying. So we'll get into those ergonomics here in just a little bit. I will also say, due to some of the way this gun functions, it does get kind of hot when you shoot it. Now, the trigger is going to be polymer. Most of your actual grip surfaces are polymer, but you're going to have like your takedown lever here, your slide release, things like that that are all metal. It is going to get hot. Now, I don't know that it's necessarily incredibly hotter than like a Glock firearm or something like that, but I did notice extended range time, this baby gets really, really hot in your hands. You know, and just activating those controls, those metal controls, because they are larger, they are a little bit more beefy. It is kind of a painful process sometimes. So I did notice some heat coming out of this gun. Nothing you can't live without, but obviously I'm going to kind of pick this gun apart because that's what you're here for, right? Other than that, I really don't have too many other knocks about the gun. So we'll kind of dive into it here and really kind of get down and dirty with the Arex REX Delta. Okay, let's go ahead and dig into this gun here. So we're going to start first, top to bottom, like I like to do. Let's go ahead and talk about the sights first. If you guys can kind of see that from the camera angle, you got a nice blacked out rear sight there with a front sight that's got a little white dot that's kind of recessed into it. Now that is not a luminescent dot, that is not a tritium dot or anything like that. It's just going to be a painted white dot. These are steel sights, so that is kind of a bonus there. And there is a nice ledge there if you like to do manipulations with your sight. They're also nicely serrated, as you guys can kind of see there. They're very low glare. They are very effective sights. However, some literature out there says that these dovetails on this gun are cut for an XD sight, which is the same as a Sig Sauer sight. In my findings, that is not exactly true. So I would like something to replace this front sight, like a fiber optic preferably or something like that. Like I said, the stock setup is fine. I would just like something that just kind of catches my eye and is a little bit more congruent with what I typically use. However, in my endeavor to do that, I kind of knocked this front sight out, and then I have both an XD sight and a SIG sight, and I found that they are a little bit too small for this dovetail. So you could physically move them in by hand and just kind of center it up there, and they would slide right out if you pushed on them. Basically no retention at all in there. Now you could probably fix that by knurling the underside of it, or maybe bending it down, or maybe even just pinning it in there. You know, once you get it in the actual dovetail, just kind of hitting the sight itself to kind of pin it in there by force. But I didn't mess around with doing any of that because it was so lightly fixed in there. And I have seen these sights just kind of move out, especially under you know, rain and wet conditions and things like that. So long story short, you're kind of stuck with the sights that are coming out on the guns for now. Now I expect there will be probably a night sight option coming out and things like that, and hopefully we get other people on the bandwagon like Dawson, and they can just make a front sight that's a little bit wider than those factory XD sights and those SIG sights, and will fit in this perfectly fine. But until then, you're kind of stuck with what came out on this gun because it is a brand new gun to the market, so the market's going to have to catch up with it, right? So let's go ahead and move on down with this gun. Next thing we'll talk about is this loaded chamber indicator. As you guys can see on the top here, top center, it is very reminiscent of the one that they're putting on the P320 now. However, it does fit a little bit tighter. I don't notice nearly as much blowback or anything coming out of that as I do with the 320, and also it is a very unobtrusive setup there, so you can feel it when it's up. It's a little bit difficult to see. It's not a flag or anything like some of those other guns have, and it is definitely going to be low enough to be out of the actual sight plane of your sights there, so it's not going to interfere with that at all. So it is a kind of a feature-packed gun, and we're starting up here already with a loaded chamber indicator that is a standalone. As we move on down with this gun, you're going to notice it's got an internal extractor. So that is inside there. It does not have an external extractor like you may be used to seeing. So the loaded chamber indicator cannot be on that. So it's kind of a standalone on top there. We'll get more into this as I kind of take this slide apart for you as far as why that is the way it is. Moving on down with this gun, you're going to see this gun was kind of crafted for contemporary pistol usage, and knowing that a lot of people carry pistols, especially in a covert manner, a lot of different things have been done to make this a very nice carry pistol. So one of the innovative designs is going to be these serrations that are both front and rear. These are called Delta serrations, so they're kind of cut in at an angle. And they serve a kind of neat purpose. So if you were to draw this gun, basically moving anyway in this direction, it's very slick. There's really no way for me to kind of interfere with that slide or anything, or for it to get hung up on those serrations that way. However, when you start moving backwards, it really kind of grabs the meat of your hand or whatever's working on it, and it lets you manipulate that. So that is kind of a neat feature there, that it is, if you were to draw it out, it's going to be kind of a snagless design. However, if you get some pressure moving in the opposite way, as if you were to manipulate the gun, it does that just fine. So kind of some neat serrations there. Now I will say, because of the cant of this slide, you guys will see the slide kind of cants up, and I've told other people this kind of reminds me of like the stealth fighter of guns. It's just very kind of geometric, and things are blocked off. That's kind of the design style with this. It is not, I don't think, some people were commenting about how it's just a poorly done gun or just kind of unfinished looking. It's definitely very purposefully done that way. It's kind of the design architecture with this gun is to have those angles and facets all over it. But along with that, with these kind of slants and things like that, it is not real grippy on the top end. So if you were to manipulate it and just not get a very good grip, and you're just kind of dealing with these real slight serrations up top, it is going to slide out of your hands. You kind of have to get deep on the slide to really get into those serrations. So that may be a drawback for some, but I've not really had a problem actually using this in that manner. We talked a little bit about the internal extractor. We'll get more into that. Kind of a neat feature that you're going to see is this back here, which is going to be a cock striker indicator, much like you have on the VP9. Now, where this differs, so again, this has been checked clear. I'm just going to do that again because I'm kind of habitual that way. Where this differs from the VP9 is, and I hope this shows up, as this articulates back through the trigger pull, that actually protrudes. Okay, so it's actually flush in there now. It's a little bit more than flush. It's kind of recessed in there right now. But as I go through the articulation of this trigger, it does protrude out there. Now, what that allows you to do is, if you're holstering this gun and you put your thumb here, if that trigger starts to move, you can actually feel that cock striker indicator move past that. It's kind of a tactile warning for you. So if you're to holster that and you have something in your holster that is going to make that gun go off, you do get a pretty good notice there, pretty easily felt on your finger that's happening. Kind of like the gadget for the Glock that moves that plate back as the trigger articulates. It's kind of built in with this gun. So I thought that was a really, really innovative feature. And again, an eye toward contemporary pistol usage with people carrying appendix and things like that. But again, it does protrude. Unlike the VP9, it actually comes out of the back, and you can feel that if something were to happen while you're holstering or something like that. With that said, it does not get in the way. I've not noticed it like bothering my vision or anything, so I don't really notice it at all functionally while I fire the gun. I think it's going to kind of round out the slide. Let's go ahead and move on to the lower half of the gun. So the first thing you're going to kind of notice, these slide stops or slide catches or slide releases here are ambidextrous, much like everything else on the gun. So fully ambi, and these are machine parts. This is not stamped steel here. So what you're going to have is it's got kind of a U-shaped cut in the bottom and in the top. So it really just kind of serves as, you know, like a scoop shovel almost for your finger to go in. However, it does maintain that nice low profile again for you know, very thin, very clandestine carry with really no snag issues there. Now what I have noticed, and I believe this is more to the snap of the gun and maybe the lack of texture here than anything else, is that at times, just like with a Glock, I will sometimes pin these in the down position as I'm shooting it. As the gun kind of rocks up, I have a tendency to pin those down, and there have been a couple times where I did not get this to go to slide lock because I was kind of overriding this these slide stops here. So just some things to think about. Obviously with training and things like that, maybe a different grip than what I have, it's not going to be an issue. But these are very nicely done, very thick, very robust. They work from both sides, unlike some of those ambi setups out there. So really nicely done. I really you know, like the way they have gone with those slide catches there. All right, guys, let's go ahead and dive into the bottom end of this gun here. So one thing that's kind of unusual with as many other features that are packed into this gun is you do have to pull the trigger to take the gun apart. So just like a Glock, you're going to pull the trigger, drop that steer, and then you have this takedown lever here. You're just going to pin that down after putting a little rearward pressure on the slide. And then things change a little bit. So once it gets past that point, you can just basically lift the slide right off. It is actually, the way it's machined, it's impossible to slide it completely on. So you're going to have to kind of just line it up here and just move it back just a little bit. So it is very easy to take this gun apart. Let's talk about this lower end here. So you got a nice ergonomic lower half here. You got these accelerator cuts on both sides. Built right into the frame there, so that's kind of nice to see. It's a place, you know, kind of a ledge for your thumb on one side and then your index finger on the other side as you're indexing that gun. Kind of neat to see from the factory. That is in kind of like a pebble finish, and then up here you have that kind of pebble texture, much like the FN 509. Down here on the sides, you're going to get into kind of some blocky design, but the sides here are very slick, and that's mostly for carrying. So if you carry it against your skin or whatever, you're just not going to notice this gun. It just kind of disappears, which is nice in that aspect. However, you do lose some of that controllability because you don't have a lot of grip or a lot of traction developed on the side of this gun. And I'm going to talk about that here in just a few moments as far as being a little bit detrimental to the function. But again, that's a trade-off. You're either going to have a gun that's easy and nice to carry, or you're going to have a gun that's very textured and very controllable. It's very hard to have both, and you can always add some kind of stippling or add some kind of decal there to develop that grip if you need it. Now, front and rear back straps are very nicely done. Those are deeper kind of blocks there. They are very nice. Very grippy, very nice and out of the way also for carry and things like that, but they do develop a lot of grip and a lot of texture, so that is also nice to see. They did a pretty good job with the grip angles and, you know, grip design of this gun here. Let's go ahead and talk next about this takedown lever. It is just like Glock, however, it's a little bit thick, a little bit more beefy than what you're going to see there, which kind of carries through the rest of this gun. Very, very robust gun, very well built gun. But because of that, I did have a little bit of an issue with this actual part. Now, there are two problems with it that I've noticed. First off, it is so large that as it's working against that locking block on the barrel there, or the locking lug on the barrel, I should say, it's developing a lot of heat. And that heat is transferred right into this metal piece that's basically riding right there up against the barrel, and that goes basically the entire length of it. So if you do index here with your index finger, or you use it as a ledge here, it is going to be very toasty after about 100 rounds or so. And I did notice that just because it's so thick, it conducts so much heat and it holds that heat in there. So that is one of the issues that I did notice with this part. The other issue is it stands out a little bit further than what you're used to probably on Glock and some of these others that take down in this manner. And because of that, if I use this as a thumb rest over here to kind of drive this gun, what was happening is it is so sharp and so far out there that it was really irritating my thumb. I was getting some blisters and things like that on my finger there, or my thumb I should say. So I actually just took this piece out, and I took some like a diamond hone, and I just kind of honed the end of this. So I took it down a little bit and I kind of rounded it off, and it still works completely fine. However, it's nice and out of the way and a little bit more slick, so I don't get all kind of caught up there. So from the factory, you might be able to do that, that modification if you're so inclined. I don't know that everybody would have the same issue that I did, kind of driving that gun off the index point, but just something to note. And it is, like I say, easily fixed if you're kind of a shade tree, gunsmith. But it is something that's probably going to need to be looked at a little bit by the factory, either making those thinner or making them a little bit less textured or aggressive or something like that. Moving on with the rest of the gun, you're going to have your slide lock or slide release, as I use them up here. Now this is a very nicely machined billet part. You're going to basically see it is just very robust, very well built, and it works very well either side. So unlike some of the ambi setups where it just doesn't work on the offside, there's no sheet metal here. This is going to work completely fine on either side. This is, again, a big chunky part, and it does conduct heat because it is a big chunky part. It does not really have a texture. It's just kind of got a scoop cut or a U on the bottom and the top, which allows you to use it both ways very easily, which is nice to see. It is also contoured for carry, so again, kind of a snagless setup there. The only issue that I did see, and this is probably more due to the recoil management of this gun, is a few times I would override that and just kind of pin it down on that last round, and obviously it would not lock open. It would go back into battery on an empty chamber. That happens from time to time with different guns, specifically with Glocks, although I've kind of been able to evolve out of that with those guns. But again, I did have that issue here. It's not uncommon, it's not unheard of, and people with a different grip are not going to have that problem. But just be aware, if you're prone to it like I am, you may have that issue. Moving on to the mag release, that is also ambi, and it's probably the nicest ambi setup that I've seen. Very little pressure to drop this mag, which is both good and bad. Obviously, if it's you're carrying it concealed against your body and you just kind of jostle a little bit, you don't want that mag to drop out. But the neat thing is these buttons aren't huge. They're nicely contoured. They're very easy to access quickly. But I don't really think you're gonna have a lot of issue with a nice holster, kind of protecting that. So that is kind of neat to see. Again, it works just very fluid, very nicely. This is probably the best ambi setup that I've ever used because, unlike some, as you go to push that, there's really no upward force. There's no pinning pressure on that magazine. It just drops it right out either side. So very neat to see. That's probably, like I say, the best executed ambi mag release that I've ever used on a gun. Moving on to the rest of the gun, the magwell itself is not much of a magwell. There's a little bit of a taper there, which is completely functional and adequate. You do have this kind of recess, almost like you'd have on the APX guns from Beretta, so it is very easy to kind of strip these mags if you need to. A nice generous base plate there, but not a huge mag well, enough to kind of get it done. But you do have some kind of runners in here molded into there, so there's not a whole lot of friction on this magazine. It loads very easy and it drops very freely because of those ribs in there, so that's kind of a neat feature as well. Let's go ahead and take a look next at the innards of this gun. Okay, so let's talk guts of this gun. Basically, one cool thing I haven't seen pointed out anywhere that I did discover is this is a serialized chassis. So your serial number is going to be down here underneath the trigger guard, and that is part of this locking block assembly. Now the locking block in this, much like everything else, is absolutely gigantic. So it is completely huge, overbuilt, and it is kind of like a cradle design that goes clear up and incorporates your frame rails, your front frame rails at least, into it. Very, very nicely thought out, very robust design. You would be hard pressed to do any damage to this locking block. I mean, it is a solid piece, which is remarkable because this actually weighs less than a Glock 19 overall. So very nicely built, very nicely put together, and very nicely thought out as far as making these things big. Again, the drawback is going to be those big metal parts are going to conduct heat. So, again, you can't have the best of both worlds. Take it for what it is. Next, you're going to see this trigger bar here, which is probably the only sheet metal part on this gun except for this actual ejector here. But that is just very thick. It's much thicker than you're going to get on a Glock and a lot of the other things there. So a nice thick sheet metal trigger bar here. That's going to go back to basically this sear down here. And that is just going to drop very cleanly out of the way. Now there's really not much in this rear part here aside from a sear housing. You're going to have your ejector, you're going to have your rear frame rails, and whatnot all kind of built into a unit. It's connected by this trigger bar, and then the front end with the frame rails, the locking block, all that kind of stuff is also a unit with the trigger in it. So I actually took this apart, and it's kind of neat to see. You just kind of knock these two pins out here. So you got one pin here, and these are very nicely made, very large roll pins. You bang those two out, you can basically take this whole assembly out. I'm not going to do it just to kind of save time here, but you take the whole assembly out, and then you can just kind of take it apart like you do like an M&P, where the actual trigger bar itself stays with the front, and this rear kind of sear housing separates from it, so then you have two different pieces there. Kind of a really neat setup, easy to take out, easy to clean, and I do believe it's going to be very advantageous to the aftermarket in the future as well, because things like the sear are easy to get to, and you can go ahead and manipulate those as needed as the aftermarket sees fit. So kind of some neat things, some promising things at least. And again, the gun itself is just completely overbuilt. So very nice to see as far as the internal goes. That is with the lower half. Let's look next to the slide. You're going to see that we have a captive recoil spring. However, this is not a double recoil spring. It's just a single spring, which I believe, well, almost lost it there, I believe contributes to some of that snap you're going to feel through this gun. It does a nice job as far as doing what it needs to do. It is very functional, very usable. However, it just doesn't seem to slow down the slide, that inertia from the slide, as much as some of your double captive recoil springs that you're used to seeing on other guns. But there is a metal rod in there for those of you who don't like the plastic ones out there. The barrel itself, very nicely done. Nice generous feed ramp there. Your locking block, or your locking lug, I should say, very reminiscent of like Glock and so on. Very nicely made barrel. Traditional rifling, you do kind of have this this extra little bushing on the end here, much like the 509 guns from FN, that just kind of locks it in there, provides a little more stability, and it does lock up very, very tight, very nicely in this gun. Here we're going to have our internal extractor. It is very long, very large. It does a great job spitting those shells out, but it is shrouded and it is out of the way there, so that's kind of neat to see. I didn't have any issues with it getting dirty, not functioning, anything like that, so you might want to take it apart, clean it once in a while, but as far as I'm concerned, it is very nicely done. The actual slide will take apart just like a Glock, so you kind of press that part down there, this little shroud piece down here, and then this back plate will slide off. You can take the rest of it out if you want to. Inside here, the striker itself, fun fact, does have maritime spring cups on it. So just like with a Glock, those plastic spring cups on the top, they do have the serrations in them to clear out water. You got a nice generous weep hole here to clear out water. And again, I had zero. This actually cleared water, probably one of the best striker guns I've had clearing water. Just did not phase it whatsoever shooting this directly out of water. So some neat things there. Other than that, pretty much standard run-of-the-mill stuff you're going to find. We do have a channel cut in this. So that may kind of present a problem as we go into some of the aftermarket people milling these and things like that. Again, there's a channel that runs pretty high up in there, so it's going to take away some of your threading. It must have something to do with either weight or the way that this safety works on this gun. But for what it's worth, that is there. I just wanted to point that out. All right, next we're going to run through the trigger on this gun. Before we do so, I will mention this gun comes with a standard 15-round flush fit magazine, and it also comes with a 17-round kind of extended magazine that is nicely contoured to the design of the gun. Both these magazines are made by Mechgar, so they're nicely done. I have seen some other people have issues with these magazines, like loading to full capacity and jamming and things like that. No such issues on my end with this gun. And again, it's kind of a peace of mind for me that these are made by Mechgar, because they definitely stand behind their mags. So if you have a mag problem, they're going to fix it right away. There's no doubt about it. You got the orange followers, or the reddish orange follower thing in there, like most of the guns have nowadays. But other than that, nice capacity, nice light magazines, well made, and again, you get kind of an extended magazine in this package out of the box. So let's put it back together if I can do this on camera. Kind of some origami here. So you get it to this level here, you basically just kind of set it on there, and then you slide it back and you're good to go. Everything's in there, and no problem, ready to go. So that's how you put this bad boy back together. Let's stick a mag in there and talk about the trigger. So the trigger on this is unlike any other gun that I've fired, striker fired gun that I've fired. The cool thing about it is you're going to have take up, so you get this trigger safety out of the way. You're going to have that little bit of take up as it's taking some of those safeties down, just like every other striker fired gun, and it pulls pretty far back. Okay, nice clean sweep. It's got a little bit of grit in it, but it is fairly easy to sweep back through that. Now, once you get there, you're going to have just the Great Wall of China basically start here. It is an enormous, aggressive, large, angry wall that you're going to hit. So what's going to happen is as you hit that wall, you can kind of be sloppy with it. It's got a whole lot of tolerance on that wall. It's not going to just break through, or kind of like the Gen 5 Glocks, how it kind of has that little hiccup and then it breaks and things like that. It's going to stage really hard on that wall. And then if you give it 6 pounds exactly of pressure, it is going to release that striker. And you can hear that striker really slamming home. So it's got a lot of force behind that striker, which is neat to see. It really dings the snot out of those cartridges. So another good vote for reliability there, right? But again, you're going to hit that wall and it breaks right off that wall. I mean, there's really no over travel at all, because as soon as it hits 6 pounds, there might be a little bit of deflection there as I'm building that pressure, but it just breaks right off the wall. It is like some of the older Glocks and things like that. It is like a 6 pound single action gun. It just breaks right off that wall. So if you're used to shooting single action, double action guns, things like that break right off the wall, that's going to be a welcome change probably for you. The reset on this gun is fantastic. One of the best resets that I've felt. It is right up there with your Canex and your P10C, things like that. And I'll try to get my finger out of the way here so you guys can see it. But I've pinned it to the back basically. And there's enough spring tension basically that it's hard for me to ride it out. So in other words, if you just kind of start letting off of that that trigger, it is almost going to rock it back into place, and it only takes like a millimeter of travel, if not less, to get back on there. So reset super short, super tactile. Just a really fantastic gun to shoot, and to shoot fast. It's got a really nice trigger. It really does. I can't complain about it. It has not, I've got 1,000 rounds through this gun. It has not changed in trigger pull, so it started at 6 pounds. It's still at 6 pounds. But that reset is just fantastic. Very predictable break, like I say, at 6 pounds. Takes some getting used to, it really does. You're going to maybe have some errant shots until you get used to that break right off the wall, because some of the modern guns do not have that, like I say, Gen 5 Glocks, SIG P320s, things like that. Definitely a trigger all on its own that you're going to have to either get used to, either love it or hate it. I really don't think too many people are going to hate it. There's really not much to complain about, but it is very unique in that aspect. Alright guys, before we get into too much of a comparison here, I do want to point out that this gun will fit in a lot of Glock 19 holsters. Now, it does not fit perfectly. You don't hear that retention, that click, because the trigger guard is a different design, but it does stay nice and snug in most of my Glock 19 holsters, which is nice to see. Obviously, this one with the light on there, we'll go throw it on real quick if we have a second. Works very nicely. You got some retention there because it retains off the light. But it will fit in most of my holsters. Not all of them though. These more minimalist designs, you're not going to have good retention there. So it does fit most Glock 19 holsters. That's how close these two are to each other. Let's take a look. All right guys, now let's do a shakedown between the Rex Delta and the Glock 19. Now a lot of people are going to be asking, well, if it's that great of a gun, you really like the gun that much, would you carry it over your Glock 19, or will it replace your Glock 19 or your SIGs or things like that? And the answer is going to be no. No, it will not. And the reason is going to be because This thing has an incredible aftermarket, and there's just no denying that. And really, I think it's hard to get away from Glock, as much as some people hate this gun, because it's got such a tremendous aftermarket. If you don't like the way the gun carries, there are all kinds of holsters out there. If you don't like the sights, there are all kinds of options out there. They're just, anything you could want for this gun is out there. That's just how the aftermarket works. If you don't like the grip, you can have it stippled. You can, order a different frame if you want to. There's all kinds of things available for these guns. And because of that, because of their popularity, because of the aftermarket support for them, I find it very hard to get away from these guns. It is not because I'm a Glock fanboy or I drink Glock Kool-Aid or just because I'm a cop, but that's the reality of it. And a lot of people still shoot these guns and are going to continue to shoot those guns because of that. So talking about a new contender like this, it's just an uphill battle as far as competing against a Glock or any established firearm like that for a while. Now, hopefully this will get to that point where it's going to be kind of a neck and neck, or give it more options and things like that. But only time will tell. Now, we'll kind of compare these two, and I think you guys are going to be kind of surprised. Well, maybe not so surprised at most of this, but one thing might be interesting to you. So if you look at them, the Rex Delta was definitely clearly benchmarked off the Glock 19. There's just no doubt about it. It is exactly the same length. It is exactly the same height, and I believe it is exactly the same width. The Delta may be, just from my naked eyes, may be thinner overall, but it's not going to be noticeable. They're pretty much the same gun for all intents and purposes. Now, it does have better ergonomics, and you don't have all the weird Glock nuances going on. But they are definitely benchmarked off of each other, there's no doubt about it. Both hold 15 rounds. Of course, the Rex Delta coming with an optional 17-round mag. Let's throw that in real quick so you guys can see how that looks, because it is nicely done. So there you have that out of the box there, that extra 17-round mag that you do not get with like Glock or whatever else. Now, talking about the ergonomics again, very ergonomic gun. You got 4 different back straps. You have a lot of different flexibility with this gun. It's got a nice undercut. It's just a very nice design. I can shoot these well. These feel normal to me, but just like Tim from Military Arms Channel said, that's probably Stockholm Syndrome because the ergonomics are pretty lousy on Glocks. But they feel normal to me now. My hand works with them. I don't know if it's just kind of morphed over time to fit this, or if it's just Stockholm Syndrome. I'm just feeling sympathetic for my captor here. But I can shoot these really well. I don't have an issue with ergonomics on Glocks. Take it or leave it, right? That's just kind of the way it is. Now, here's where things get a little bit interesting. I'm going to put the original magazine back in here. Both of these have unloaded 15-round magazines. Let's take a look. Gen 5 Glock 19 on the scale. 1 pound, 8.5 ounces unloaded with magazine inserted. Rex Delta. 1 pound, 6.1 ounces, so almost 2.5 ounces lighter unloaded out of the Rex Delta as compared to the Glock 19. Now that is some pretty significant savings, really, considering everything else is pretty much the same, and there are a ton of overbuilt parts in here. They really skimped there and looked very hard to find where they could remove that weight, and they've done a very nice job with that. That is pretty much going to wrap this up. And again, just a last little comparison there. These are pretty much the same gun. They're in the same market. This bad boy being significantly cheaper, lighter, having a lot going for it. Now, I know overall most people, when they hear or see a new striker-fired gun, they're kind of, how much more can we see, right? We've already seen most everything. But this does have a nice combination, a nice package of parts into it. Definitely check this out if you're in the market for a new striker-fired gun. If you want to be a hipster and not get what everybody else has. If you like Slovenian stuff. I don't know. If you like the design here, if you carry mostly in the waistband, this has a lot going for it as far as that's concerned. And of course, some safety features, like I mentioned before, that are not available on other guns. So, ton going for it. Nice trigger, nice reset, accurate gun. Overbuilt, and I believe it's going to be in the long term just as reliable as a Glock is going to be. I don't see anything that could fail in here, anything that could go wrong, and I think has been thoroughly tested at this point as far as that is concerned. And again, great lockup, great barrel. Really hard to go wrong with this gun. That is my take on the Rex Delta. I will be keeping this gun. I will be carrying this gun once my holster gets here and I'm qualified to use this in my capacity as a police officer. So that's kind of cool. We'll see how this kind of unfolds, okay? Until then, guys, thanks for tuning in. Continue to learn, continue to develop, continue to go to classes and develop your skill as a shooter and to practice your craft by going out to the range and really demonstrating your Second Amendment right. As always, thanks for tuning in, guys. Jay Helmsing.